Hi, I'm Corey Driver, and this is Moving Forward. So this week we are in 1 Kings 19 and Matthew 14, and we're talking masters and disciples and tiredness. So if you've been on an airplane anytime in the last forever, you have heard or maybe ignored the safety announcement. If there is a sudden loss of cabin pressure, please put on your mask first and then help those around you. You can't help others if you are not conscious. There is something about self-care and community care that are mingled together, right? We can't just have one. You can't just put on your own mask and look around and say, ooh, you should probably put on your own mask, right? Like, we have to help people. But you also can't do community care. You can't put on somebody else's mask if you black out. Okay. And so the two are mingled, and we have this week stories of masters who needed some help before they could help their disciples. Okay. So turning then to 1 Kings, Elijah. So Ahab and Jezebel have been making Elijah's life difficult for some time. They don't stop. Elijah is, in a word, over it. He goes out into the wilderness intending to die, sending his servant away, going still further into the wilderness. He is done. And an angel shows up, and Elijah is urged to eat and take a nap. Now, we see this meme going around all the time in Christian circles. Sometimes all you need is a snack and a nap, right? Like, Elijah was upset and God said, just eat and take a nap and you'll be fine. But the thing is, Elijah was not fine, right? The snack and nap did not help. On the strength of a snack and a nap, Elijah went for a journey, came to Horeb, the Mount of God, and still had the same complaint. And Elijah goes into a cave, and there is the wind and the earthquake and the fire, which we all know. And there's this still small voice, or quiet, crushed voice, a silent, pulverized voice, I think, is one of my favorite translations. And then Elijah does an interesting thing. He takes his outer garment and wraps it around his head so he can neither see nor hear very well. Tells Elijah, okay, anoint 3 people. Anoint Elisha, Jehu, and Hazael. And what's not said, but what is perfectly clear is, and then you can be done. You see, Elijah needs a break. He needs to stop being persecuted. He needs peace and rest. And God says, here's a successor. Anoint a prophet after you. And then, a couple of leaders, and you're good. A snack and a nap did not help. Elisha was still deeply in despair. And as it turns out, Elijah is not going to do any of the 3 things that God asked him to. He will take off his garment, the one that he had wrapped around his head so that it was harder to sense God with eyes and ears. And he will literally toss that on Elisha's shoulders without stopping, without speaking to him, until the lad catches up. And then, not the warmest welcome into prophethood. What have I to do with you? Okay. Ultimately, Elisha causes another prophet to anoint Jehu, and then goes to tell Hazael that he will be the leader, and maybe anoints him, maybe doesn't. The text isn't clear. But what is clear is Elijah is not the one doing it, right? The snack and the nap were not the thing. Elijah needs a break. Elisha needs help, right? And you have an exhausted, used up, burnt out, let the Christian professionals hear me what I'm saying, leader And snacks and naps don't do it. He needs help. And so he gets help. He puts on his oxygen mask. Finally, somebody to take over. And then he helps the next generation. But it needs to be said, when Elijah needed out, he really needed out. After this episode, when he takes his mantle and puts it on Elisha, he is simply a source of death. His words and their effect kill people until finally he's taken away. Elijah is a bit of a poisonous pen, right? His words are words of death for many, many folk. And so you have this burnt out, exhausted leader who just needed to be replaced. And he knew it. That's all he wanted. Snack and nap aren't it. Somebody, please take over. And that's what he gets. So then in the gospel reading, Jesus is also exhausted. Jesus has heard the word earlier in the day that his relative John had been murdered. And still the crowds come out to him, and Jesus had compassion on them and healed their sick and then provided a miraculous feeding. But then after that is all done, after the 5,000 men plus women plus children eat, Jesus compels, and the word in Greek is pretty forceful, compels his disciples to get into the boat and please go away. Thank you very much. Jesus is finally alone. This is the oxygen mask he needs. Jesus likes to be alone, right? Especially in Mark, but here in Matthew as well. Jesus really needs his alone time. And so he finally gets it. And in the evening, he notices that his disciples, whom he compelled into the boat, are really struggling. The storm has blown up, and Jesus, in just a beautiful little section, decides to save some time and walk across the lake instead of around the lake. So he walks across the lake, and the disciples see him coming, and they're doubly terrified. There is the storm, but also then there's this human person walking across the lake. And they want to know what's happening. Now, the lake, open water is a particularly scary place, especially if you're on a storm. And that's not culturally bound. Being in a storm on open water is scary. I don't care who you are or where you're from. But it's doubly scary because in many, many cultures, the water is the portal to the bad place, let's say. So the deep is sort of the primordial other. And so the question is this Jesus recognizable as Jesus, or is this like a spirit from the underworld? This is a spiritually scary place. And so Peter, being the lead disciple, decides to check and says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you. Now, why is this brilliant? We don't get told a lot how brilliant Peter is, but he is, right? He's the lead disciple for a reason, and I'm on Team Peter. This is brilliant because if this person walking by is the Lord of life, is the Messiah, is the one that's going to save the people, then walking on water makes perfect sense. Jesus is doing it. That's plain to see, this being whoever it is. And so if Jesus is the Messiah, if Jesus is the one to save, then Peter will be able to walk on water. And if it is a ghost or an agent of the watery abyss or some malevolent spirit, then Peter's feet will not stand on anything. Just put a toe outside the boat. Oh, no, it works like water always works. I'm not going to get all the way out. or I might really put 2 feet in, but I'm going to hold on to the side of the boat. But as soon as Peter's foot hits something that he can walk on in the water, okay, this is Jesus, right? Like before you let go of the boat, you're like, okay, yeah, all right, good. Okay, so we're saved. You are the one who is going to save us in this moment and at other moments as well, right? And so Peter's litmus test for are you Jesus or not, just brilliant, right? It's no words, it's no secret passwords. It's, are you an agent of life or are you an agent of death? An agent of life. So Peter's walking on the water, but then he notices the wind and the waves and begins to sink. And Jesus says, "Oh, you of little faith." But of course, Jesus doesn't let Peter drown. He picks him up out of the water, no easy feat, I'm sure, throws him on the boat and calms the storm. Jesus has gotten rest, and he is about his work of saving disciples and, the whole world. Jesus has put on his oxygen mask, spending time alone in prayer, grieving for his relative who had been murdered just earlier that day, right? Think about that psychological and emotional strain. Jesus needs a little time out, and then he gets right back to work saving his people. That's how it's supposed to work. So we have these 2 examples of self-care and community care working together. Elijah's example is mostly negative. Elijah did not just need a snack and a nap. Elijah needed a replacement. Elijah needed some prolonged getaway, retreat. Have people stop trying to kill you is what Elijah needed. And he gets a brief respite in Elisha, helping him, coming alongside him, but still he is a voice of death. Jesus had all the food and miracles he needed at any time. What he needed was some alone time, some time to grieve, some time to process, and he gets it and then gets back out into ministry and saves his disciples immediately. Hear this, the people empowered by God's Spirit, Elijah, the mighty prophet, Jesus, the Messiah, still have needs. They still get fatigued and overwhelmed and burnt out, and they have needs. They need to put on their oxygen mask before they can help others with their oxygen mask. Why would we be any different? So my question to you is, what's the oxygen mask that you need to put on so that you can help train up the next generation in faith, right? What do you need from God to get back in the fight? It might be for you a snack and a nap. I don't think it was for Elijah. It might be for you peace, just a little break. Give me a retreat. It might be something else. It might be a disciple to take some of the burden off. It might be community members surrounding you and uplifting you and saying, we got this, take a break. So this week we have the tales of 2 masters who needed to put on their oxygen masks first before they could help their disciples. They'll put on those oxygen masks and then help the people out. Amen.